So I'm pretty sure if I don't show you this right now in September, you're gonna be very mad at me in November and December, because you're gonna be like, why didn't you tell us that I could keep growing in these even in the winter months when it's snowing? So there is a way that we can modify our Greenstalk planters to let us grow stuff when it's 0 degrees outside. I did it all last winter and I'm gonna do it again this winter, but I thought I'd show you exactly how I do it, because it's a little bit like people don't realize that this is a possibility, right? So we're going to reset the Greenstalk planter for fall today and for winter. And I do already have some things going in this one, but the second one on the other side of the door needs a full reset. So we'll get into exactly how to kind of refresh soil in a container garden like this, because that is a huge part of it, and also what plants will do best in this environment, because while it is protected with the additional like modifications that we're going to make, we still can't grow like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant in it. We're going to be growing stuff that thrives in cold weather. Just to give you kind of a baseline of where these two Greenstalk planters are kind of at right now, I'll go through what's already planted in here. So on the top, this one I did a lot of direct sowing in. So you'll see like a bunch of like lacinato kale babies, and I still have these okra plants that like most of them never took off. So what we're going to do with these is actually take them out, because at this point in the season I'm having to make hard decisions, right? I'm having to decide, like, there's no way with temperatures already going down to the 50s and 60s at night that a lot of these heat loving crops are going to fruit. So even though like things like this pepper plant has flowers on it, we actually want to start taking these flowers off, because if I'm not going to pull this plant, I want it to be focusing all of its energy on finishing up these fruits, not making entire new ones. So you want to start pulling the buds off of these if you're going to keep it in here. This one has, I think, 3 on it that are still really small. And so at this point in the season, again, another hard decision I have to make is to pull this out. I do have another kale going in here, so I could just chop and drop this, but because it's a container, I'll probably end up pulling it. I do have a lot of Swiss chard. Swiss chard is biannual, so it won't flower and go to seed until next year, and it will overwinter in here, so we're gonna leave the Swiss chard. And I also put some little beets in here, so we'll pull those before they actually get a chance to get too big to like crowd out the Swiss chard. I did kind of as an insurance policy throw more kale in here, but this will probably end up getting pulled. I have a whole bunch of cabbages. These I already direct sowed a couple of weeks ago for the fall, and those will definitely stay. I do have some spinach in here. It's kind of not getting as big as I hoped it would, but I'm thinking maybe once it starts to cool down, it will do a little bit better. And then I have my monster eggplants, but again, where we're seeing just a couple of flowers starting to fruit in a time where they really don't have time to fruit, we're gonna end up pulling things like this out. There's a few more things like that in here. We've got another eggplant, and then just more spinach, cabbage, Swiss chard, kale. So this one is almost, I'd say like 85–90% done. There's just a few things like this Thai basil, the okra, the eggplant, and the pepper that we're gonna pull out. We'll have some empty spots that we can fill in here. And then taking you over to the second Greenstalk, this is where things start to get a little bit crazy, because I have not reset this one. I have these marigolds I started from seed. They're huge, and they're literally just starting to flower, and it's been, I don't even know, 2.5–3 months since I put these in. And at this point it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, I need this space. So as painful as it is, these are going to be coming out. I also have some more eggplant in here. This one doesn't have any fruit on it, so I don't feel nearly as bad pulling that. This one does. This one has lots of little flowers, and you can tell it really wants to be productive, but we have to make hard choices. Tomato plants, they do have supports for these. I just never got them, so they are kind of wonky looking, but they're happy. They have tons of flowers on them. Problem is, the temperature is dropping below 50. There's just absolutely no way these are gonna fruit and then ripen before we hit frost. I also have this really sad looking pepper plant. I don't know what happened here, honestly. It just got munched. There is some stuff I've direct sown already in here, some different mustards and kale. I honestly don't remember what kind of mustard this is. I have some spinach in here. This okra, I don't know. I might leave it because it looks like we might get a few off of it in the next couple of weeks depending. But this pepper plant, of course, it's like decided to put on a show right now with like a million flowers. This is the problem with living in a short growing season. You have to make these tough choices with these pepper plants and other things that they could put on a whole nother flush of fruit, but they're not going to. And we just have some more eggplant going over here. These are the Ichiban eggplants, and they have been doing so well for me this year. Another thing that I think people don't really realize with the green stalks is that you can grow full-size plants in them. Now, of course, when we're talking about fall and winter, most of the crops that we can grow are either brassicas, leafy greens, or root crops. They're not huge plants. But you can grow tomatoes, eggplant, peppers in these. You can grow squash, you just need to alternate pockets. The pockets are actually 10 inches deep, which is totally deep enough to grow most things. Like even my raised beds, the ones with the arches, are only about 10 or 11 inches deep. They look deeper because they have that kind of extra space where the sub-irrigated trays are sitting, but they're not that deep. I kind of alluded to this earlier, so they make these supports to help you with kind of taller, sprawling plants. If you're doing tomatoes in particular with one of these, you definitely need to add it, but I just have one set. You can add a set to every single tier as you go, but they just kind of like rest there. And they're really thick, sturdy plastic, just like the green stalks. For our purposes, we just need one on the top tier because this is gonna act like support arms for our frost cover. And the frost cover is specifically made for the green stalk planter. So I'm just spinning this around and adding my supports. They just lock right into the top edge here. The only caveat I will say, giving you a fully honest review, is that they can kind of blow off. Like they're not really like on here that hard, so it's really just like gravity keeping it in place. You push from this direction, it's not going anywhere. But I had a couple situations last winter where we got like big windstorms, and a couple of them would just get knocked loose. So it's something I had to like check on a couple of times throughout the season. And I don't know if that's something like they're working on. I did give them feedback about it. These just kind of lock in together, so we kind of have to go like up and then down, and then they sit in these little knobs. It just snaps right into place, and you can kind of keep spinning it around to get the full arms. I need to move these planters. These ones are just barely scraping the wall of the greenhouse, and I can't even put it on that one. I just checked. So we're gonna have to do some adjusting here when we actually need to put it on. Just to give you like an idea, it just snaps together in like 2 minutes. It's so easy. And this gives us kind of an extra like 10 to 12 inches, depending on what point you're at, to kind of have our frost cloth hang down and give us a little bit of an air gap without actually touching the plants and kind of dragging on them, which is a big issue when you're talking about frost protection. If your frost cover is touching your plants, it's a lot less likely to be effective. This is our frost cover. I believe it's 85% light transmission, which is exactly what we want for the fall and winter to make sure that our plants are still getting enough sunlight. They do also have a bug cover that's just like this, but it's for bugs. So if you were experiencing really heavy pest pressure, you could use something like that. It just kind of pulls around. It has a circle shape on the top, so it rests perfectly on top. So when you're using this in the winter, you can actually just unzip it and access all parts of it without taking the entire cover off pretty easily. Zips together at the bottom. So you can see it's like a pretty stiff material, and having something thick like this that still lets enough light through really is enough to protect your plants. So as long as you're growing some of our cold-loving crops in here, you can keep picking stuff from your garden all winter long in a space the size of a doormat. It holds 30 full-size plants. Like, these things really do sell themselves. I am an affiliate with them. I've been an affiliate with them for a couple of years now. They did give me a code as well, so this will take an additional $10 off even if they're on sale, and the code is my name, Dagny, D-A-G-N-Y. And I will put the link down below for these so that you can grab them. If you're looking for a way to support the channel without actually, you know, just throwing money at me, this is a great way to do it. Okay, sales pitch over. I'm gonna show you guys exactly how I'm refreshing these so that they can continue to feed and support the life of the plants throughout the whole season. The first thing that we're gonna do is pull out our old plants. And most of these are on the top here. And I'm gonna try to pull out these okra by the root. In a garden that wasn't a container garden, I would tell you to chop and drop these, leave the roots in the soil, because that way it can decompose in place and return some of those nutrients to the soil. But because we're dealing with a container garden, we do need to actually pull these out, because otherwise the roots just take up more and more room over time, and there's no room for the new plant roots to develop. Oh, this is painful. And this one's gonna have big roots, and I do have some seedlings in here that are probably gonna get damaged, but we can just replant. Sometimes I just plant extra as like an insurance policy. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do yet, so I'll just throw something in here, especially kale, because it's so easy, and just see what happens. I do think we need to normalize letting go of plants. We can get rid of things and compost them. It's not necessarily ideal, but it's also not the most wasteful thing ever, because it's going into the compost. It's going to get repurposed one way or another. So in this planter, we only have, let's see, 1, 2, 3 pockets that are really empty. The top ones, like, I didn't disturb the roots too much. Now, one thing about the Greenstalks is you fill this top reservoir, and they have this patented system where basically it trickles down so slowly to all the levels. There's a bunch of these different planters on the market, and people always ask me, well, what's the difference? That is the difference, and it really matters, because on the other ones, what happens is the layers don't get evenly watered. One layer will get way more than the bottom layer, for example. Everything on this planter is going to get evenly watered, even with all 5 tiers added. The only downside to this, which is true of any garden really, is that if you're using the automatic watering kind of trickle system, it's not going to work when you're planting seedlings, because it's not keeping the surface of the soil wet. It's keeping kind of more underneath wet over time. So when we're doing direct sowing of seeds, it's really important to be mindful of this and kind of keep the pockets watered until those seeds germinate, and then you can just start filling the reservoir again. So this particular planter, I already did a lot of that, and we're not going to be doing a heck of a lot of direct sowing today. We're actually going to be doing some starts. So I have a couple of broccoli plants that we're going to throw in here, and weirdly enough, I didn't end up losing a huge amount of soil when I pulled this plant out, so I actually don't need to add any, because I'm putting a start in here. It has its own soil that's going to take up a little bit of room. But I picked up some broccoli starts from the nursery. We're going to get into more about the difference between starting from seed and starting from starts from your nursery. New England drops the ball on this, let me tell you. If you're from Massachusetts and you have a recommendation of where I can get nursery seedlings for fall, please tell me, because I went to 4 places. All I could find was broccoli, kale, lettuce, and some cabbage. So this one's gonna be painful. Okay, gotta rip these babies out. We're losing a lot of soil with these too. You know, they came out so loosely, I'm like tempted to transplant them somewhere else and see if they make it. But, oh, that one did not. Okay. I'm actually just gonna lift this top tier off, because these are like really loose. I feel like we're gonna lose like a vast majority of the soil here. I'm just covering that center drain hole as I go, because if that gets clogged up with dirt, the tier underneath won't flow properly. Okay, we lost a lot of soil. All right, since I have to pour more soil in here and it's high up, I'm gonna cover the drain hole with a piece of tape. So I have this bag. Don't laugh at me. It's been sitting out in the sun, and it's super hydrophobic. Good quality soil matters, because even though this bag is crispy, it's gonna hydrate right back up, and that is the difference. Like, quality soil is a lot more forgiving. So we're gonna water this in and bring it back to life. Okay, before we top it off with a little bit more soil to get it to the top edge, I am just gonna do my Coast of Maine fertilizer, because this needs to get worked into the top 1 to 3 inches of the soil anyway, so I might as well kind of let it do the work for me. So we gotta pull some more stuff out of here. Oh my god. We're gonna have to do the same to this tier. Okay, so in a perfect world, I would take all these tiers off and just reset them, because this is like way more root than I thought I was gonna have. Wow, this one looks really empty. Okay, still a few more things to go. So we have emptied this out and it needs some food, and there's a few very empty pockets that we have to fill up. I decided to just take off the tier and show you this. So these are the drip discs, basically. I don't know what they're really called, but they have tiny little holes that you line up with each of these pockets, and it just sits on top of this piece right here. So because this container got really empty to soil, it's just way easier for me to refill it if I take the tier off. I shouldn't have to do that with any of the other tiers, but it is a good best practice. Now, I don't always follow best practice clearly, but we're doing what we can. Okay, we'll add our layer of fertilizer. Now we can put this back on. So when we do these layers, you just have to make sure those holes line up with the pockets, make sure it's making contact with the soil, and then when we add our next tier, we just have to line up those notches. If you are dealing with chronic pain, or maybe you're just not as strong, this is the trickiest part. And what I will say is that they sell the tiers individually as well as in sets of 5. So you could end it right here, or just have 2 tiers. It doesn't matter. Any way you want to do it, it will function the same, and that way you don't have to be lifting up and over. And now I only have to do this like twice a year, so I just kind of put up with it. All right, quick break. We had to sunscreen up. This is like that time of year where it gets so cold at night. Like it's already down to like 50. I'm having trouble getting my tomatoes to ripen, but then during the day it pops right back up to 80, and I have to change all my clothes, put the sunscreen on, and get back out here. So we took a little break, but we're back. I have my seeds ready to go because we're going to be putting some more of that broccoli in this planter, but I also have some seeds that I'm going to be starting because while we have a lot more flexibility with what we can grow inside of the greenhouse all winter long, outside, if you're going in a container with just a little bit of frost protection, we do need to be choosing varieties that can survive 0 degrees Fahrenheit, things that can get very, very cold. And we already have a ton of kale in that first Greenstalk planter. So I'm actually not going to be adding any more kale into this one. What I do have is some arugula, some joy choy, which is a pak choy, some tatsoi. I also have a burgundy tatsoi, which is called Violetta. It's an F1 variety from Territorial. And then I have some beets. These are Badger Flame beets from row 7. So this entire top tier is empty, and then this half is empty, and then there's just a few kind of stragglers left in here. I have the okra that I just couldn't bring myself to pull out just yet. And so I think I'm just gonna put something in around the okra, and I have my kale, and I think this is some kind of endive. I'm not sure. I definitely know it's a mustard. I want to do the tatsoi at the top because it's going to be so pretty. So this is an organic green coin tatsoi. I think it reaches about 14 inches across, so it can get to be a really big plant, but it adds so much good kind of winter interest to the garden because it does stay green even when it gets cold outside. And I'm just using this dibber to kind of make a little indentation where I'm going to put my seed, because I don't know if you remember when I planted out the Greenstalk in the spring, I totally lost track of like where I was because all the pockets just look the same. So if I don't make a little divot, even though these seeds don't need to be planted that deep, I will completely lose track of where I was. I need some kind of like little marker that like shows me where I end. Like, you know, when you're knitting and you have like a row marker, if I could just clip something on here, actually, that might help me as I go around to keep track of where I've already been. So tatsoi is still in our brassica family. Pretty much all your brassicas are going to go about 1/4 of an inch deep, so they don't need to be very deep at all. And it can be a good idea to plant a couple of seeds per spot just to make sure you get good germination. And this will just keep going and going all winter. And so when you're like craving something green in the depths of winter, it is so nice to have. I also really recommend getting this spinner base edition on these because it does make it so much easier when you don't have to like walk around the whole thing. And if you are positioning it somewhere like I have where the back is like up against a wall of the greenhouse, what happens is it doesn't get like an even amount of sunlight. So we need to make sure that we can spin it. I usually just like whenever I walk by throughout the day, I'll just spin it. It doesn't really take any additional time, but a dibber like this is really good for making kind of basic indentations. It also goes pretty deep. Like when I'm doing the starts, I can get pretty deep with it just by wiggling it. And I like the wood. The wood is comfortable in my hand, even though it's a hard material, it's not padded. I think wood is better than metal for a handle anytime because it's so much more comfy in your hand. If you can find one that fits the cup of your hand like this one does for me, it makes things so much easier. So I think the next row we'll do arugula. This is Speedy arugula. Last year I did Astro because I didn't like arugula, and Astro is supposed to be like the least peppery of the arugulas. So if you don't like arugula, it can be a safer bet. But I want to branch out this year. I want to see if I like any arugula, and it just has to be cold, because that's another thing. If you grow it in really cold temps, it gets sweeter and more mild. So I'm gonna go down another tier and put in an arugula right here. You should do 2 or 3 seeds and then thin it down to 1 seed, or you can grow it as microgreens. You can grow it much closer together than that if you want. But you can see I'm not being very precise, and I think this is something with new gardeners in particular have a tendency to really get caught up in like seed spacing and depth and making sure you get it right. And there is some benefit to that, but at the end of the day, like, I garden intuitively, and that means that I kind of have a sense for different categories of things and how they like to be planted. And I know that when I'm dealing with the category of like mustards or brassicas, they all like to be planted pretty much the same way. So that's our first 3 tiers. I think I said earlier that this Violetta was a burgundy tatsoi. It's actually a burgundy baby pak choi, although you can grow it into a full-headed pak choi as well. And pak choi is another one that does really well regardless of the temperature. So we're gonna pretty much just chuck pak choi and joy choi into the rest of these containers. Joy choi will get really big compared to pak choi. It looks like about 11 inches long. This tier has a single little, I don't even know, sad little spinach on it, I think. So we'll use that as our starting point so I can keep track of where I am. And I kind of want to alternate these, but then I feel like I'm going to confuse myself. So I'll just do the Violetta on this row because the Joy Choi is going to be the biggest plant that we're growing, or the tallest plant. It could actually come up to like right here. So we want to put it on the bottom so it's not blocking anything else out. This is where I get really excited because there is nothing quite like growing something yourself from seed to harvest, especially when you know it's something that's going to serve you all the way through into the deepest, darkest, coldest, dreariest months. What you will find is that a lot of the stuff that is the most cold hardy are Asian greens. And what's cool about that is it's going to kind of change what you eat a little bit, which can be good, right? Like, we need to increase the diversity of our food quite a lot. There's so many amazing foods that we don't get to experience at the grocery store, but that we also just don't think to grow in our own home gardens a lot of the time. And if you're going to grow something from seed, I think you might as well grow something unique that you couldn't get anywhere else, that you maybe have never had before, that you could have only gotten if you visited another country. So I did make an executive decision, which I didn't discuss with you before I did it, to just direct sow this entire Greenstalk, all the empty pockets. So I still have a bunch of broccoli starts, but we still need to prep a couple other beds for fall, which I think I'm gonna just do as a part 2 video, and we'll throw the broccoli in there because those will be in the arch beds, and we're adding a couple new features to that over the winter so that we can continue to use them all winter long as well. That one's gonna be a little bit more painful because we have to rip out a lot of stuff that is beautiful and doing so well right now in order to make space. I think that will do for now. I'm just gonna get this watered up. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe. Thank you so much for gardening with me, and happy growing.